series of conversations and workshops to bring awareness and also support the toe tag wall that documents all those who have passed at the border, and also acknowledging that journey, that struggle to come here to the United States. Las culturas, especialmente South Terrain 94, the end document that mentioned the Migration Project, a multimedia exhibition based on collaboration research by Jason Leon, anthropologist, executive director of the undocumented Migration Project, Michael Wells, co-curator and photographer here at the exhibition, also Ella Shipman, assistant director and co-curator with La Plaza's curatorial team, led by Karen Hendricks, senior curator, that records the journey and testimonies of undocumented immigrants and their families who attempt to cross here at the U.S. border. Today we have a very special guest all the way from Tijuana, Paulina Olvera, Cáñez, directora ejecutiva of Espacio. Paulina is the founder and executive director of Espacio, a binational community organization based in Tijuana, which works with migrant communities to provide access to education, human rights, comprehensive care, and at the same time raise awareness in the community about the realities of migrants. I did have the opportunity to work with Paulina back in 2016-17, another project, a documentary with Evan Bailey, discussing the issues with recent immigrants of the Haitian community in Tijuana. It's a pleasure to have you back. I pass it on to you.
Thank you very much, Jimena, and thank you everyone for being here. It's an honor for me to be able to share a little bit about our work in Tijuana. Bienvenidos a todos, es un honor para mí compartir sobre nuestro trabajo en Tijuana. So I will go ahead and share a bit about our work in Espacio Migrante. So I can share about what is happening on the ground in Tijuana, precisely with asylum seekers, migrants who are trying to come to the U.S. to seek asylum, but find themselves stuck at the border. So what is Espacio Migrante? We are a binational community organization based in Tijuana. We're also constituted as a nonprofit in California, but in Tijuana we have a shelter as well as a cultural and community center. And part of our work is promoting access to human rights such as education and healthcare, as well as comprehensive care for migrant families, and raising awareness in the community about the realities of migrants. So we really love to also work with art and culture to raise awareness about what is happening with migrants in reality. Our mission is to create a safe space where migrants can weave community, access education and cultural programs, and receive comprehensive support in their migration process. Also to defend and promote human rights, social, racial, and gender justice in migrant communities through cultural and community dialogue. And our vision is that the border be a sanctuary of human rights, cultural dialogue, and opportunities for migrant communities. So I will share a bit about the different work areas that we have in our organization. First of all, we have a shelter, and the objective of the shelter is to be a safe space for migrant families. These are migrant families that come from all over the world. In the last years, the migration coming to Tijuana has diversified. We have always been a city of migrants because of our location, but in previous decades we saw more migrants from Mexico, maybe from Central America, deportees from the US, and these migrants continue arriving to Tijuana, but we also have migrants from Haiti, African countries, from all over Latin America really, and even from Ukraine and different parts of the world. So as US immigration policies continue to get tougher, and it becomes harder for asylum seekers to come safely to the US, that means that border cities such as Tijuana, we have become like large waiting rooms where migrants have to stay months or even years without knowing what will happen with their asylum process, if they will be able to arrive here safely. So our objective with the shelter is to provide a safe space where they can be with their families while they continue with their asylum or immigration process. And just to show you a bit about the diversity of the people who we have in our shelter, these are numbers from last year, from 2022, and the largest population we had last year was 98 people from Haiti. We had second place El Salvador, Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, Chile, and Brazil, although many Chilean and Brazilians are children of Haitian parents who were born in Chile and Brazil. Also Nicaragua, Ecuador, Colombia, United States. This might be surprising, but these are US-born children whose parents were deported. So now they're also waiting to seek asylum, even though the children are US citizens themselves. Also from Venezuela and Cameroon. And the population really varies depending on the different policies. For example, the previous year, 2021, we had mostly internal displaced population from Mexico. So a lot of families from Michoacán, Puebla, who are fleeing from organized crime, and they were also waiting in Tijuana. But 2022, we saw a spike in Haitian migration, and depending on the different U.S. policies, this year we have also seen a spike in Venezuelans arriving, Nicaraguans. So it's really a diverse population that we work with. So these are some images from the shelter. For example, we try to offer a safe space, but also a space where they can feel at home despite all the challenges of being in a different country, in a place where they have to share housing with many different people. The picture on the left is of our Christmas party where we have piñatas, a posada, and then different celebrations like Independence Day for Mexico and El Salvador, celebrating birthdays, because one of our slogans is Resiste Gozando, which means joyful resistance. And we have found that by working with art and also building community is also a way of resistance, despite the difficulties that all these policies imply for migrants who are in Tijuana. We also have a legal clinic, which means we have an immigration attorney, but she's a Mexican immigration attorney for migrants who decide to instead stay in Mexico and seek refugee status in Mexico or different type of immigration status. It's not really a decision that they make. It's more if they find that their case in the U.S. is very difficult or they have been through family separation, they might have no other choice but to seek an option in Mexico, because the other option would mean going back to what they are fleeing from. So we also work with our legal clinic with a lot of migrants, especially from African countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, who are in Mexico, but they are trying to bring their families. So these are mostly single adults, mostly men. They are trying to bring their wife and children through reunification process in Mexico, but once they are able to do this process, they eventually come to the U.S. to seek asylum. But the process to be able to bring their families can take up to 3 years. We had a very good friend who also worked with us in Espacio Migrante. She's Cameroonian, and she left her 11-year-old twin girls and 13-year-old boy in Cameroon. It took her 3 years to be able to bring her family. Now she's in Maryland, and she's in a safer place, but this is what our legal clinic supports families with, family reunification, or to have a status in Mexico. Even if their final destination is not Mexico, they need documents so they can work, so they can rent a place and make a living, because the wait time, like I mentioned, can take up to 2-3 years. Some people have been in Tijuana for 6 years, so this is what our legal clinic supports with, as well as human rights violations. We find a lot of challenges for migrants who are denied health care, who are harassed by the police, because of institutional racism that exists in Mexico, and also the lack of documents places them in a riskier place. So these are some things that our legal clinic supports migrants with. And since all ultimately, the goal for most migrants who are in Tijuana is to come to the U.S. We also do a lot of Know Your Rights trainings, and for this we partner with U.S.-based organizations, such as Al Otro Lado, INDEF, BAJI, which is the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, Haitian Bridge Alliance, and they either do virtual workshops, and we connect a screen on Zoom so migrants can hear this information, or sometimes they come to Tijuana to provide this information. Another focus that we have is providing this information in their language, because having such a diverse population means that some migrants speak Haitian Creole, French, English. Those are the main languages that they speak, and we have staff that speaks different languages, so we always try to provide information in their own language so they can understand it. And last year, in the end of last year, we began a new area, which is research and advocacy. But we have began doing this work since 2021. Since 2020, sorry. In 2020, we did a study called In Tijuana, It's Very Hard to Have Rights. And basically, we interviewed migrants to see the impact of the pandemic on their daily lives. Many Haitians, many Central Americans, many migrants who were in Tijuana and were more established, had been able to find work, maybe start their small business. They lost everything during the pandemic. So the pandemic, it was about healthcare, but also it shed a light on the inequality, the racism, because the people who were impacted the most were migrants. So we collected over 400 surveys, and the title is In Tijuana, It's Very Hard to Have Rights, because that's what it showed us, the lack of access to basic rights. And imagine not having access to healthcare in the middle of a pandemic can be a matter of life and death. We had a terrible case of a Ghanaian young man. His family was in Ghana. He was going through that process. He got sick, and the general hospital in Tijuana denied him healthcare. So he died outside of the general hospital. So not having access to things like healthcare in the middle of a pandemic is really something that is life and death. Last year, we were able to do a second research project about racial and language justice, and it was in Tijuana and also in the city of Tapachula, which is in the south of Mexico, between Mexico and Guatemala. And what we see right now is that Mexico de facto has become the border wall. We see that Mexico is collaborating with the US to stop migration, and for us going to Tapachula, to the other border, really opened our eyes to see that there's so much militarization, and Mexico is really playing that role in stopping migrants from arriving to the US-Mexico border and from coming to the US. So we're in the process of publishing a report about that. And now that we have a research and advocacy coordinator, she's also working in a project to strengthen migrant leadership project. So we do a lot of community events, community meetings, where we listen to the community, we talk, we work with leaders, but we hadn't really done a job documenting everything that is said in these meetings. So now we have someone who is documenting it and helping us. How can we use this to really push for changes in Tijuana, and also share it with U.S. partners so they can help us push things on the U.S. side as well. And one of the outcomes of these community meetings is a law change that we're making at the local level. It's a reform to the education law in the state of Baja California. So one reality is that most of the migrants coming are families with small children. So even if their goal isn't to stay in Mexico forever, they are spending 2, 3 years, 4 years in Mexico. So what happens to children in the meantime? Are they not going to school? We identified a lot of barriers where school in Mexico is supposed to be for everyone, regardless of immigration status, but in reality, we saw children being denied access to education because they had no immigration status, because they don't speak Spanish. I think in that regard, there's a lot of road traveled in the US, especially in California, and it's also because children of immigrants are now in education spaces, and they have been doing these changes. And in Mexico, we have been used to being a transit country, but not a place where people stay and need access to healthcare, education. So we're happy that now we're working to make changes in the education law that hopefully will benefit children to access education. And one of my favorite parts about our work is the comunidades area or communities. And this is the work we do with community organizers. So right now we have 3 community organizers. 2 of them are from Haiti, one is from El Salvador. And what they do is work with migrants who don't live in shelters. Because also, even though Tijuana is one of the cities that has most shelters in Mexico, we have about 25 shelters. There's so much need that most migrants are either in homeless situation or they are having to rent an apartment, rent hotel rooms. So, and many migrants, many communities don't speak Spanish. So what the organizers do is go out into the community, pass out flyers in their languages, and invite them to our community meetings so we can listen to the community and hear what are really their challenges and how can we accompany them in making these changes. And so from the work that our amazing organizers are doing, we have started different programs. And one of them is precisely about language justice. So for many Haitians, Africans, even Jamaicans, people from Caribbean and African countries, the first challenge while they are in Mexico is learning Spanish. And we have worked creating a model which is like survival Spanish. How can they live in Tijuana, maybe go to the doctor, ask for a job, move in public transportation. These are pictures of some of our students, and we took them to Secut, which is Tijuana's cultural center, so they can also get to know the city where they are. But language justice is also having information available in their languages. For example, when COVID started, there was no information from the government in other languages than Spanish. So migrants didn't know about quarantine norms or if they had the right to have vaccination. So we work with translating these materials and going out into the community and doing Know Your Rights sessions with them. The other program that we have is Education in Movement. And luckily in Baja California, even though there's still a lot of work we have to do, we're a little better than other places in Mexico like Tapachula, where we have complete lack of access to education for migrant children. In Baja California, we have a department from the Department of Education that supports migrant children. The problem is it's a really small office and not a lot of people know about it. They don't have information in different languages. So we're trying to work with them to connect migrant community with those programs. But it's also about how can they stay in school. So we support with maybe donations of backpacks, helping them to buy their uniforms. During the pandemic, also having access to tablets or internet. So that is part of the work we're doing so they can go to school. And we do a lot of workshops with parents so they can know first that education is a right for their families and how can they access it. And the other very important issue for us is racial justice. I have to admit, like a lot of people in Mexico, including myself, we don't grow up being very aware of racism in Mexico. We think that in Mexico there's mestizaje and we're all equal, but it wasn't until working with the migrant community, especially Black migrants, that we open our eyes and see how much racism there exists in Mexico, how much police brutality. In January 2020, a Haitian man died in police custody while he was having an asthma attack. So when we heard in the news worldwide about the George Floyd case, we saw so much resemblance and we said, the same things are happening here in Mexico. So we started doing Black Lives Matter protests, Las Vidas Negras Importan, and documenting the racism. Now there's an observatory of racism in Mexico and Central America, and some organizations that were part of it were trying to document this racism. Because our authorities say what are you talking about? There's no information, there's no racism in Mexico. That's something in the US maybe, but not in Mexico. But we see that in reality, Black migrants suffer the most from not having access to healthcare, being criminalized. So this is part of what we do with our racial justice work as well. And these are two friends, they're Cameroonian, and this was during a protest in June 2020 for Las Vidas Negras Importan, for Black Lives Matter. And the other big issue is food justice. We also started this program during the pandemic because many people, maybe they already had a job or they were already a little bit stable, but when the pandemic started, people started coming to our center asking if we had any food or any way to help them with basic things. So when people bring in-kind donations, we donate that. But when we have resources, we have another program which is basically like food stamps. They get a card where they can go to the supermarket and buy what they need. And we think this is important because they can buy food that is culturally appropriate for them. We also have African community that is Muslim, and sometimes when we give out food, we think always tortillas, frijoles, but they're not used to eating that, or they have a special diet. So I think this program has been important so that families can prioritize what they need to eat or the needs they have, like maybe diapers, medicine, other urgent basic necessity items. We also have a cultural and community center. It's in the same building as our shelter, and the objective is to have a space where we can use art and culture as tools of healing and resistance, and have a space where migrant community and also transborder community can have an ongoing dialogue. And we do this through different projects like visual arts workshops, language classes, cooking workshops, dance projects, film, etc. And this is where our slogan came about, Resiste Gozando, which translates to joyful resistance. We have found that using art and culture is also a way to resist and weave community. So these are some pictures of our cultural and community events. And to share a bit about the most important cultural projects that we have, with all this work with migrant families trying to access education, we started doing in 2020 a community telenovela. Basically, we had to get creative and see, we found that a lot of the families really love telenovelas. It was something that they enjoyed. And we said, why don't we write a telenovela? So we started doing theater workshops, listening to their challenges in accessing education, having them write their stories, and from this we wrote a script, and we filmed it, and we're in the process of editing process. So we already have half of it's 6 chapters, so we have 3 of the chapters already, and hopefully when it's finished we can project it in different spaces as well. This is a fictional story based on true stories. So it's the story of a Salvadorian girl with her mother who is trying to get into school in Tijuana, and also is friends with a Cameroonian woman who was able to access university. Because these are the different stories that we have seen in Tijuana. These are pictures where we premiered the first 3 chapters of the telenovela. And Ebony is actually the film director for that project. Another project is Morritas Luchadoras, which could translate to fighter girls, maybe. But it's basically a space for girls and teenage girls where we invite different women artists in Tijuana, and they have a space where they can learn different things like photography, making comics, dancing, but also express themselves and their concerns, their ideas, and we can really raise their voices. we wanted to do something to raise their voices, but we always have the challenge that we can't expose people or they can be very public because they're asylum seekers, especially also if they are children. But we found that through their work, we could lift their ideas, their voices. So these are some of the storytelling workshops that we did with Morritas Luchadoras. And they also did dance and also creating their own books, basically. We also celebrate Dia de los Muertos as a tradition in Mexico, but also as a protest against all the deaths that happen because of these unfair immigration policies. And this is when we connected with Hostile Terrain 94. And we thought this project is very important because all these policies, both from the US and Mexico, what they ultimately do is that they make it impossible for families, for individuals, asylum seekers, to travel safely into the US and seek protection. I think the ultimate goal of these policies is to make people desperate and take other routes. This is the policy that was created in 1994 as prevention through deterrence, and it's not a coincidence. It's an intentional policy that meant to drive all asylum seekers and migrants to the desert, where the hostile terrain or inhumane climate conditions would take care of it instead of having the government face that is their own policies, and as well as in collaboration with Mexican authorities. So these are pictures from 2022 Dia de los Muertos. 2022 was one of the deadliest years in the Mexico-US border. So we were raising our voice to speak about all the deaths both in the US and Mexico for migrants trying to come safely. And last year we finally started a collaboration with Hostile Terrain 94. We actually had planned to start before the pandemic, but the pandemic stopped our plans. We're very happy that we were able to start this collaboration and also raise awareness in a city like Tijuana. Even though we are a border city, I think, and I also speak myself as a fronteriza, we're very desensitized. We see immigration and the border wall as part of the landscape, where we sometimes don't question anymore, what does that border wall mean? All the deaths that happen because of that wall, all the family separation. So it has been very useful to have these conversations with students, with the general community, about what this border means and what is really happening with migrants. So our first workshop was in Colegio de la Frontera Norte. This is a research center with students that are doing their master's or PhD in issues like migration and the border. So they are more closer to these issues, but it was still very strong for them to actually fill out the toll tax. I think this project really has two purposes. One is to honor the lives of migrants who lost their lives, even those who we don't know their names or anything about them, who haven't been identified, and also document what is happening. So a lot of students share with us that it was very confrontative, like it really placed them in front of their reality. We also always advise people participating to take care of their mental health, to take a deep breath when they're going to fill out these toll tags, because it's a strong reality. So this was the first workshop, and now we continue working with different schools mainly. So right now we started one session and we will have 6 sessions total with Instituto México, and these are secundaria students, so middle school students. So it's interesting because they're very young students, maybe 14 years old. They are Tijuanenses, they're from Tijuana. But oftentimes, like myself growing up, they're not aware of everything happening at the border. Many of these students they might have a visa and cross regularly. We're a community in Tijuana who many people have family on both sides of the border, is used to crossing to San Diego to go to school or vice versa. So to really understand what this wall also means for asylum seekers is very strong, but I think it's important to do these type of projects also with young children and with teenagers. And one of the beautiful things is also the part where they can express themselves when they connect to one of the names. Some of the students said, for example, oh look, this guy was my age, he's 14 years old. Or another one mentioned, I think these two are brothers because they have the same last name and they are 15 and 16. So even when we don't have all the information, they could connect with them. And so they have this space where they can share messages or just drawings and connect with them. Also in a human way, recognize that these are people who lost their lives, who they have families in their home communities. I think it's very important because all we see them as numbers and statistics, all these deaths. So this is the end of my presentation. I think I'm very honored to be part of this, and I think it's important what LA Plaza de Cultura y Artes is doing in organizing this exhibition and this workshop, because it's really an important tool to honor people who have lost their lives in the desert because of these policies, and also recognize their humanity. So I'm very honored to be part of this. Thank you.
Gracias. Gracias. What beautiful work you do down there. How big is your team? I mean, how do you get funding for all those wonderful programs? It's absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much. So our team is now 12 people. We have really grown a lot because we started our work in 2012 and we were all a group of volunteers. In 2019 we opened the shelter and it was just 4 people. And now because of the pandemic and all these policies, we have grown a lot. And part of my work is actually doing fundraising. And most of our funds come from US-based foundations, or even a few international, a few Mexican donors as well, and also individual donors even. But before the pandemic, we had, for example, a lot of groups and schools come to our center, learn about our work, and make a donation. I think it affected us when the border closed and they stopped coming. But we're trying to find new ways. For example, now we have a little store with some merchandise that we sell. Sometimes we have these community events and we might use them for fundraising as well. We're starting to explore the world of crowdfunding as well. So we're trying to get creative, but so far, like 98% is from grants that we're able to get for our programs.
Beautiful work.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So thank you so much for being here, for doing this presentation. My question is regarding towards working with the migrant communities that are there because of the barriers with languages and reading proficiency. Have you seen that the government, or at least in Tijuana, have they moved towards providing more resources as well, not only to help you all, but to connect with a lot of the migrant communities beyond just speaking Spanish?
The answer is no, they haven't done much. Now only in INAMI, which is the Mexican Migration Institute, they have one Creole translator, but Haitians are one of the largest communities, and we also have people from African countries, even people who speak in indigenous languages. There's no translator in the hospitals, and this also happens in Mexico, in indigenous communities. We were speaking with some partners in Yucatan, and they said also there's no Mayan interpreter. So I think in language justice, there's still a lot we have to do. And it's one of the things we're trying to push for. I think civil society in Tijuana is doing that part, but the government is not doing it. Even the US also. Now the US launched a new app called CBP1. It's basically the only way that asylum seekers can seek asylum. And until a few weeks ago, it was only in English and Spanish. So what happens to Creole speakers? Now they translated to Creole because of so much pressure, but there's indigenous languages, there's African languages. So language access is one of the main problems because people, when they start their immigration process, they don't know what they're doing. Or if they have a health emergency, they can't access health care. And we had a case of a Haitian woman who is pregnant in our shelter. She went to the clinic, the public clinic, and they turned her down because she didn't speak Spanish. So somebody from our staff went with her, and then she was able to access health services. But the doctor who attended her spoke in a very racist manner, saying, Haitians, they're just here, not like Ukrainians who really, they are fleeing from conflict and they deserve to be here, but Haitians, they're just taking advantage. That's why when Haitian women give birth, we have to tie them down. So these are the things that the doctor said. This is a doctor that is giving attention to women, to Haitian women. So we documented a complaint in human rights, but what we're trying to do is document all these things and trying to push for change in the local level too. Fernanda? What is a telenovela?
No, when?
When? Okay, so the telenovela will actually be finished in March. We were able to show the first 3 chapters in December, and in March we will have the complete telenovela, and hopefully by May have subtitles in English as well.
Hi, I'm Christina Martel. I'm representing KQBH, a radio station here in Boyle Heights, and you can find us at lpfm.la, but I'm also representing Rise for Unite, and we have been to the Haitian encampment, and we've been working very closely with Al Otro Lado for about 3 years, and so we are part of what is happening to help, but it is a continuous effort because the numbers keep rising, right? And so my family's from Tijuana. My mother's from Tijuana, so my roots are very deep there. So this is something very close to my heart. And so we are raising money. We've raised about $150,000 just as a grassroots, or we're just grassroots. We're not even a nonprofit, but we work with Al Otro Lado. So my question to you is, how can we help you? How can people who are watching this live, how can we help you raise money to continue in your mission and your vision? Because I know for a fact that the need is great, especially among the Haitian population. When we visit the Haitian population, there is an encampment. They're outside, they are exposed, there are children, there are women, pregnant women, and though some of the other shelters that we work closely with are more housed, and the equity, even amongst that, is very, very harsh. So how can we help?
Thank you so much for that. And we also work very closely with Al Otro Lado. They're a very important partner because they're legal service attorneys from the U.S., but they're based in Tijuana. So it's an organization that we trust and we work closely with. And I say we trust because with all this disinformation, there's a lot of people taking advantage of migrants who charge them money, pretend to be attorneys, and charge them $2,000, even $6,000 for processes that should be free. So Al Otro Lado does a very important work. And what you mentioned about the situation of Haitians and Africans, even in shelters, they find many times racism. We went to a shelter where they mentioned they have Haitian families sleeping on the floor, while Spanish speakers have access to beds. So we even see this in the some organizations that are supposed to be there to support them. So in a way that you can support Espacio Migrante is going to our website, espaciomigrante.org, and there's a place where it will take you to donate through our PayPal, or you can send us a message on Facebook or Instagram, Espacio Migrante, and we can follow up to see how you can support. We take either in-kind donations or monetary donations. Any support is welcome because we work every day to feed all the families in our shelter and also to do our programs and also work with the outside of the shelter. So thank you very much for that.
Gracias.
For your work. And I want to say, bueno, quería mencionar que aquí está Félix, un buen amigo. Él es de Honduras y él le tocó estar en Tijuana en 2020, 2021, justo cuando estaba el campamento de migrantes. Él es un líder muy activo, que me da gusto que ahora está en Estados Unidos. Y la verdad, este trabajo lo hacemos gracias a nuestro trabajo con líderes migrantes y siguiendo también cómo ellos están organizando para ayudar a sus comunidades, ¿no? So I want to recognize my friend Felix. He's Hondureño, he's from Honduras. He was in Tijuana during the 2020, 2021, during the pandemic and also these encampments. And we really do all this work thanks to our work with migrant leaders like Felix, who are already doing a lot to support their own community. So, gracias, Felix.
Con eso nos despedimos. Otra vez, muchísimas gracias. You're doing amazing work. It's so inspiring. And thank you so much for sharing the programs.